After our first real winter here in Michigan in several years, the warm breezes that signal these first days of spring are a welcome change. I love living in a place with four seasons, and I love spring. The constant newness of plants poking up through the ground, the smell and feel of warm air pushing the cold air back north, even the rainstorms and the smell of damp earth alive with possibility. The change itself gives a sense of freshness and newness and helps convey the passage of time as we move from one stage of life to the next. Several years ago, I was walking with our kids in the autumn and I was surprised by something I'd never seen before, even as the brilliantly colored leaves were falling off of the trees. The buds were already present. I'd always assumed they grew in early spring, but they were right there, already in autumn, tightly balled up, waiting even before the last leaves had fallen off of the trees. They'd formed in the summer, and they'd be waiting the whole winter long until the time would be right to spring forth and unfurl themselves to the sun. Even if, in the midst of winter, in these sometimes dreary days of early spring, it seems as if nothing will ever be beautiful again, the buds know that they will come out again because they are only sleeping. We know, even as late snowflakes swirl in March or even April and cold snaps threaten fruit trees, that spring will eventually come and summer will follow. But of course, we all experience changes in our lives that are more permanent. Loved ones die or become sick, our own health changes, or relationships change. We'd like to think of our days as predictable and controllable, but that predictability and control only goes so far. Sometimes, in the midst of experiencing grief or anxiety or stress, whether it's personal or merely a very reasonable reaction to the chaos of life in this world right now, it's easy to feel as though we are not buds waiting to open, but dry bones with no way forward. Deep grief is only possible because of deep love. In a society that would rather not acknowledge the depths grief can go to, we want predictable patterns to follow and plans that describe for us how we will feel and when we will get better. But anyone who has felt deep grief knows that it's a process that follows squiggly lines and not some straight path from sad to happy. And perhaps what's more important for us to remember is that even Jesus wept for his friend. Even Jesus, God incarnate, the Word made flesh, the resurrection, and the life, wept because his dear friend had died. Jesus felt the hole left by Lazarus's life. Jesus did not rock up 4 days late for the funeral and say, "Ta-da, I'm here. Everything's better now." He went instead to the tomb, wept with those who mourned, and shared their grief with them. He listened to the anger of Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, and then he restored Lazarus to his community and made the community whole again. Jesus even invited the community to unwrap Lazarus' bandages, to undo the work they had done to prepare him for death, thereby welcoming him back into life. But Jesus didn't do any of these things before he shared in their grief and before he acknowledged the holiness of this grief. Because grief is holy. It's not something to be avoided or pushed down. It's something that connects us to the people we love and have loved. It's something that connects us to the future we envisioned, which is now lost. Allowing grief to consume us entirely is unhealthy. Allowing ourselves the chance to grieve, on the other hand, particularly in and with community, gives us the chance to integrate that grief into our lives as they are now. We are changed forever by having known and loved what is now lost. Grief is holy ultimately because we ourselves are holy. We are holy because God has breathed life into each one of us. Each one of us is filled with the very breath of God, with God's Spirit, the same Spirit that moved over the waters, that caused Lazarus to rise, that caused Ezekiel's dry bones to walk. We are holy because God created each one of us and cares about each one of us. And because we each bear that image of God, we act in solidarity with one another, knowing that God also weeps with us when we experience pain. Without death, resurrection is impossible, and resurrection needs community. Without Jesus, Lazarus would not have been raised. Without his community's welcome and care, Lazarus's resurrection would have had no meaning, because community is where we find love, and love is what makes life worth living. As Christians, we bear witness to the promise that death does not have the last word. We remember the promise that although God does not cause evil things to happen, God can most certainly cause good to rise up, even when there has been terrible pain. We also remember that God has breathed God's Spirit into each one of us, causing us to rise up in hope even in the face of death and destruction. We know that hope is not an easy thing to find in the midst of Ezekiel's valley of dry bones. We know that hope is not an easy thing to find at the entrance to the tomb. And yet we also know that to live in hope, to trust in the God who loves us, is an act of resistance. In these last days of March, when the gray days with snow flurries are punctuated by days of fresh spring warmth and the smell of green is in the air and crocuses and snowdrops start to bloom, we know that spring is near. On this last normal Lenten Sunday, on the last Sunday before Jesus journeys into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, we remember that even when we are experiencing a winter of anxiety or depression or grief, we trust, as Mary and Martha did, that even when we have witnessed death, we will also witness resurrection, rising up and supporting each other in God's beloved community. Amen.